Ladies and gentlemen, welcome into another episode of the Straight Fire Podcast. We're so glad to have you all listening from wherever you're listening from. Go ahead and support the podcast in any way you can. And we have kind of a special episode, I guess, to jump straight into it. This was a request sent to me. Do you think I should read it or... I'll read a part of it. The topic we have today is talking about dancing, and specifically, is dancing a sin? How should Christians address dancing? Things like that. And Noah, Landon, while I pull this email up, y'all tell me a little bit about why this is. Why do the Church of Christ even consider this a sin?
Well, I think this is a really good topic to talk about first off, with prom being right around the corner. It is a question that a lot of us ask, and we should ask this question, is it wrong to go to prom? Is it wrong to dance? And I want to preface this with the kind of dancing we're going to be talking about. Because when you say, well, we believe that dancing is a sin, you're going to be like, really? Like, all dancing?
Get off Fortnite.
Right, yeah. Like, I can't do the gritty anymore? No, and I think there are some kinds of dancing that there is nothing wrong with, like tap dancing or something like that. Or even a married couple in the privacy of their own home choosing to dance. I believe that is fine, but what the kind of dancing we're talking about is the kind of scene that you would see something like at prom. And, we start off by asking why, or is it wrong to do this? Is it wrong to dance? Is it wrong to go to prom? And I just wanted to start with, I think this is a really good thing to talk about because it is something we need to ask because it's kind of a rite of passage for teenagers to go to prom. So we have to ask the question, is it wrong?
Yeah, and it's good for us to have an answer to this because, it's not something we really think about. Like, I know growing up homeschooled, I didn't think a lot about, well, do I need to have an answer for dancing? But it is something that real people have real struggles with because I know this is such a big deal for public schoolers and just anyone in general. You don't want to feel left out, So it's such a big deal to get to participate in it or to have scriptural reasons to not participate in it. Because if you don't have those scriptural reasons, you're much more likely to cave in when the time comes, when you're peer pressured to go to this thing.
Yeah, I mean, it's just become a massive part of our own culture, right?
Yeah.
Going to prom is just like going to, I don't know, another big event.
It's a rite of passage.
Yeah, again, I guess I was trying to think of something else that we all do, but it's like graduating
really
high school.
Is.
Yeah,
It's
it's just something you always do. It's expected that it will always be done, and it is very, very weird, and I imagine awkward when you have to tell people that you can't go to prom. I mean, Landon, I'm sure some girls asked you to a prom. I know it's happened.
I've had a dude ask me why I don't go to prom.
Okay, that's close enough.
Close enough. I mean, I've never had a girl ask me that.
But yeah, wow, I really imagined you would. But anyway,
okay.
Let me pull up the email. It was sent in by a girl. That's all I'm gonna say. Sent in by a girl. And I'm just gonna read a part for you here. I had a suggestion for a topic, and this would be school dances. I personally have never gone to one because I'm homeschooled. So are we.
Join the club.
Yeah, hey, homeschool strong, baby. But if I did attend a traditional school, I would choose not to attend because of what I have been taught on the subject. On the other hand, I have many friends who are Christians who go to school dances and say that the Bible does not have really anything to say about them. If someone were to ask me my opinion on it, I would say that I believe it would be wrong to go, but I wouldn't necessarily know where to go in the Bible to show that. Well, have you come to the right place? Not me specifically, but hopefully Noah and Landon can give you some great passages while I try to manage the conversation, if you will. And so I kind of took that email and I made a few questions, right, as I do for these podcasts. And the first one is simply this, and it's kind of the question I already asked: why do we consider dancing a sin?
Well, to start with that question. Let me pull this up real quick. To start with that question, why is dancing a sin, right? And again, we have to go back to what Landon said at the very beginning. We're talking about the kind of dancing that goes on at a prom. We're not talking about the 18th century ballroom dancing, or we're not talking about, people being on a stage and doing some tap dance, theatrical, anything like that. We are talking about a specific type of dancing, and I'll get into that in a second. But just Matthew 5:28. Is the first verse that came to my mind. I'm sure it came to a lot of your minds. And it says, "But I say to you, whoever looks at a woman to lust after her has already committed adultery with her in his heart." So when we combine teenagers who struggle enough with sexual purity. Right, we had a whole series on that. You could almost call this.
I was about to say, this might be the three-piece.
You could call this part 3 of the podcast.
I guess the only thing was it wasn't planned, but yes, this basically is.
So, and you combine teenagers and who struggle enough with sexual purity,
right?
And then you have people dressed immodestly. You have, which has again previously been discussed, with dimly lit, provocative dancing that goes on at most proms. Right, with suggestive music. We have a pretty bad scenario going on here for anyone proclaiming to be a Christian. There is nothing good happening at something like this, right? And I want to come back to this later because most people aren't trying to be sinful, they're just ignorant. Yeah. But there is a really, really big problem here. Right? This is a very sinful environment because, as Jesus said in Matthew 5:28, it incites that lust, right? It makes us people, and I don't want to be too graphic here, but people are moving in their bodies in a way that wants other people's attention in a sexual manner, right? That is what's going on here, and that's the kind of dancing that is wrong, right? And it goes back to that definition of immodest that we talked about. They are drawing attention to themselves that's not their attention to draw. Right? That's only, like Landon said, for a married couple to look at each other like that. And when the rush is happening, that teenagers, they're all together, they're having fun, they're partying, and they're excited. It's dimly lit, not many chaperones, not anything goes, but there aren't too many rules. And there's really what is stopping Satan from taking advantage of these people, right? And it is just a terrible environment to be in. And dancing is one of the key problems with it, right? It is that immodest attention that you're drawing to yourself.
I think you painted the picture that I wanted us to paint. It's not just the dancing that's the problem. It's an atmosphere that our culture has built for this dance. You have a dim lit room. You have songs with very suggestive lyrics, almost like they're trying to push you towards doing something that you should only save for marriage. You have immodest dressing, and more often than not, drinking becomes part of the problem. So, you have an atmosphere that surrounds this that you just know is wrong. But, a lot of people's responses, and I've heard this in response to prom, talking about prom, is that our prom isn't like that. Maybe you go to like a private school where they have a prom where we only have clean songs and the lights are on, but you still have the problem and everybody dresses modestly. Number one, I think that's very hard to control the environment.
Yeah.
But you still have the problem with the kind of dancing that you're wanting the teenagers to indulge themselves in. And the two verses that immediately came to my mind were these. It's 1 Thessalonians 5:22. It says, abstain from every appearance of evil. And then 2 Timothy 2:22, it says, flee youthful lusts. More often than not, the Bible talks about sin, and it talks about how you need to stand fast and be unmovable. You need to put on the armor of God, and you need to defend yourself, and you need to be ready to fight against the wiles of the devil. And you need to be able to do all these things. But then it gets to the topic of youthful lust, and it says you need to run. Because I think God understands that there's a lot of things that you can defend yourself against. But as a teenager with raging hormones, and it's a thing, you are not going to be able to stop yourself when this happens. And so you need to flee youthful lusts. There's a lot of things you can fight against. But there's some things you just need to stay away from because you're not going to be able to overcome them.
And that's why we say, oh, you can go to the prom, but don't dance. Or you can go to this, but don't participate.
You can go to a bar, but just don't drink.
But when you're young and these youthful lusts are real, don't even get close. Because once you're close, you're too close. You're too far in to run now, right? There is no escaping it. It will take hold of you.
There's a 3-word saying, choose your battles, right?
Yeah.
If you choose this battle, you will lose. I hate telling you that, but any form or fashion of this kind of environment is a losing battle. And I'm sorry, no, go ahead.
I was just gonna say every piece of it, like me and Landon have talked about, every piece of it is against what we stand for. There's a verse in Song of Solomon. First time Song of Solomon's been mentioned on the podcast.
I'm going to say that is the first Song of Solomon.
But it just talks about
ever.
Keep love sleeping. Don't arouse it, right? And this does everything to arouse that type of love.
The entire environment, I think I was going to say that earlier, the entire environment is meant to arouse you, right? Yes. And in a way that, again, let it lie. It's for later. It's not for now.
these teenagers, they don't need to be thinking about anything like that right now.
And, I think of like the way we have a great example of this in scripture of the way this affected someone's mind, right? I believe it was Herod. King Herod was having a party, and whose daughter was it? Herodias' daughter came and danced before them, and Herod, got caught up in the wine, in the alcohol, in this sensual environment, right? Maybe not unlike one we would see in a modern day prom, and he lost his head and he executed John the Baptist. He dug himself in so deep of a hole because of the lust he had for this woman that he lost whatever reason he had. He said, "I will give you anything up to half the kingdom." And when she asked for a man's head, he looked at those around him and he knew that he was too far gone at this point, and he executed John the Baptist. So when you're looking for examples in scripture of why don't we go to places like the prom, why don't we indulge in these things, it's because of the way it is almost like alcohol, where you lose your sense to reason, right? These things come in and affect your mind in a way that causes you to lose sense of reality and causes you to lose sense of objective right and wrong. Would you all agree?
Yeah, I was just going to say that account's taken from Mark 6. And, verses 19 and 20 are really interesting. It says, "Therefore Herodias held it against him and wanted to kill him, but she could not. For Herod feared John, knowing that he was a just and holy man, and he protected him. And when he heard him, he did many things and heard him gladly."
Exactly. He lost his head.
So this was someone that he heard gladly, probably considered a friend. And because of the dancing that happened and him putting himself in a very bad environment where he wasn't thinking clearly only about what was in front of him, he ended up promising to kill someone that meant a lot to him, and that he wasn't planning to kill, who he was in fact protecting.
Leonard, do you have anything to add? Or I have a question. It's one that I didn't write down, but it goes with this.
Go ahead.
Oh, okay. All right.
Shocker.
No,
he has a question he didn't write down. What?
Oh no.
It's just that idea of like, is it the dancing itself or is it the environment? And I have an idea of what the answer is. I just want to put it out there in case anyone's struggling. Because like we'll say, alcohol, maybe this intoxicating beverage isn't a sin. And if you're wondering about that, great podcast on that. But it's being drunk is, right? Is it, maybe this dance isn't the problem. It's just everything that we've made it into.
Galatians 5:19 says, "Now the works of the flesh are evident, which are adultery, fornication, uncleanliness, lewdness, idolatry, sorcery, hatred, contentions, jealousy, outbursts of wrath, selfish ambitions, dissensions, heresies, envy, murders, drunkenness, revelries, and the such like, of which I tell you beforehand, just as I told you in times past, that those who practice such things will not inherit the kingdom of God." And so this idea, and it's a word I want to introduce to you, is this word lasciviousness. And that's a word that no one uses. It's a really big word. It's used in the King James Version of these verses, Galatians 5. And so what lasciviousness is, when you get down to its roots, is that you do something that incites lust. It's not fornication where you do something that you shouldn't do before marriage, but it's you did something to the mind of the person. He said when Jesus talked about adultery, and it starts in the heart when you think about it. What lasciviousness is I've done something with the intention to incite lust. Thayer is a Greek scholar. He did Thayer's Greek lexicon. And when talking about lasciviousness, this is what he said, and this is interesting. Specifically to this verse, lasciviousness is the unchaste handling between males and females and indecent bodily movements. Does that not sound like dancing? But the thing is, dancing isn't really the problem. The problem is lasciviousness, which is wrapped up in dancing. Because if we say dancing is the problem, then you shouldn't dance when you're married. That's not the problem. Dancing isn't the problem. It's the lasciviousness that our culture has wrapped dancing around. And it's this idea of I'm dancing with the purpose, because when you dance like you do at a prom, whether you want to accept it or not, you're dancing with the purpose of inciting lust. Because what you've done is it's unchaste handling of males and females. You're holding someone of the opposite sex like you shouldn't be, and you're moving your body in such a way that there's only one thing that can happen. I I don't understand how you can't see that, because the reality is when you dance at prom, whether you'd like to admit that or not, I don't think most people go to prom. Most girls go to prom with the intention of making the person they're dancing with think things that they shouldn't think. I hope most girls don't think that. But the truth is, whether you like it or not, whether you're a Christian or not, when you dance with that boy at the prom, what you've done is you've put something in his mind that Jesus said never should have been there.
Let me say really quickly, we are not the person who emailed this question in. We are not sitting here like lambasting you for not knowing these verses.
Oh, absolutely
or whatever.
not.
I don't want to make it feel like we're lecturing you about this. We're trying to we're using your great question that you sent in,
Absolutely,
and your experience that you've had with it to inform everybody. I don't want anybody to think we're sitting here like, how could you not know about A, B, and C scriptures?
Yeah, and again, we don't want to blast those friends that she has either that goes to this. Again, it's most of this, like Landon talks about, is ignorance.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But why we do use such strong language is because this is a problem that will affect people in ways they don't even think about. Hebrews 13:4 says, marriage is honorable among all, and the bed undefiled, but fornicators and adulterers God will judge. Well, Jesus said fornication happens when you lust on a woman. So this is something that is sacred, that God has reserved for a man and a wife, that we now just put in front of everybody, even teenagers. Most sins we don't allow teenagers to have access to, at least till they're older, right? We kind of, put them away somewhere else, and it's for this is the adults.
Alcohol, you gotta be 21.
Drinking for the adults.
Yeah,
Yeah.
this is
gambling for the adults.
This is 21 and up. But this is something that, well, it makes people happy, so we should let everyone have it. No, this is something that is sacred, right? And ultimately, God will judge these people, and we wonder why our youth grow up to be such bad adults with such vices, is because it started in school, and then they get out, and where do you think they go? Well, they go look for the same type thing, and it gets worse, and it gets worse, and it gets worse, and it gets worse, till eventually they can't function anymore. So it is a little thing, and most of the people don't realize what they're doing. But if we don't realize what we're doing, then we are going to go down a very, very bad road.
That kind of leads into the next question. Question 2. What does our willingness to let our children do this say about our culture?
A lot.
Well, thanks.
Yeah. Well, there's that. All right, next question. I think, the world is going to be the world. And our culture has shown that it's going to be a culture that is going to push for the things that you crave now. That's what you go after. You don't wait for marriage to have sex. You don't wait for all of these things. You just do it when you want it and you have it now. And, when I thought about this question, I spent a lot of time thinking about why the world is really the world. But I know I'm not really answering your question, so I apologize. Hopefully,
you're good. You're good.
The world is going to act like the world. And, it's kind of funny when I see Christians surprised that people in the world are sinning. We get surprised when people walk around drunk, and we get surprised when people all do these things. The world is going to be the world. This sounds bad, but we shouldn't expect anything less because they don't know better.
Yeah,
or maybe they do and are choosing not to. I think an important thing to think about this is our willingness to let our children do this. What does this say about the church? Because there are a lot of Christian families, Christian fathers and mothers who are allowing their daughters and sons to go participate, there's the word, I almost lost it, participate in an activity that genuinely nothing good can come from. Philippians 4:8 says to think on pure things, true things, noble things. You are not going to be able to think on those types of things in the environment that you're sending your kids into. You're basically setting them up for failure because nothing good is going to come from me going to the prom. And so when I think about this question, it is true that it shows the kind of culture that we live in and the nasty environment that we've created for ourselves. But likewise, the environment, what this shows about the church and the fact that so many Christian families, and I can think of almost a 50-50 split between Christian families that allow their kids and don't, which usually is split between the public schoolers and the homeschoolers because we're homeschooling, we don't have a prom. And so even some of the ones that don't have their kids going to prom, it's just because you're homeschooled and you don't have one to go to. And so it's what happens to the culture of the church that we would find it okay to send our kids into an environment that quite literally sets them up for
I struggle with the idea of us sending when did they go to prom? 17, 18?
Juniors, seniors.
Yeah,
seniors,
yeah.
seniors.
With us sending, because people don't grow up as fast anymore. That's been a well-established fact, right? You know, back in ye olden days, they were getting married at
Back in the 80s?
Yeah, no. Well, my great grandmother got married at 16 and had a kid, I think, a little shortly after that. You know, they just had a first child, right? And like, again, you know, I'm 18 and I'm still living with my parents. And you know, I say that I'm going through college, all that. And this isn't about. I'm trying not to make this about me. I don't know how we got down this road. Anyway, all that to say, we're sending these kids, and maybe they weren't considered kids. You know, again, when my great grandmother was. But we're sending these kids into this like nightclub environment. And why are even, and you, Landon, you said people in the world, they don't care about, you know, their sin, and they don't care about showing us that they're doing sin. But we wouldn't send these kids in, well, I guess about 18 is probably when you would start sending them into places like this. But why are we okay with that? Why are people of the world okay with, hey, we're not going to let you drink or gamble or, you know, whatever else, drink or gamble. But yeah, we're going to send you into this environment because surely it's okay, right? This question, why are we okay with that? Why is the world, even with all the sin that they accept, why are they willing to put that on their children, right? Do we not want the better things for our children? Do they seek to corrupt them because they want their children to be like them, right? They don't like seeing someone who has a better standard than they do. Is that the thing? Is that why they ridicule those who don't go to prom, who don't have, you know, who even are homeschooled, right? Because they just don't like people with a higher standard than them. And I don't say that to judge, you know, but I do think that is the truth of the matter.
I would answer your question in two ways. The first way, I would say they don't like it when people say, well, I'm not going to go to the prom. It makes them feel bad about doing that and how they're allowing their kids to do that, right? Satan has done a masterful job of making sin feel normal. He has done a masterful job of now it is not the people who are in the right who are questioning the people in the wrong, but it's the people in the wrong who are throwing doubt and throwing hateful words at the people who are trying to preach truth. And he says that's who they are. They can't help it, right? And it's this idea of, and the second way I was going to answer your question, it's the idea of, well, I want my kid to feel good. I want him to be happy. I want him to enjoy himself. Jeremiah 17:9 says, "The heart is deceitful above all things and desperately wicked. Who can know it?" If we are doing what feels good, then ultimately it's going to lead you to a very, very, very bad place. Right? God didn't tell us to feel saved. He told us to know that we're saved, right? Mm-hmm. He didn't give us this information so that I can have this happy feeling in my chest that I'm going to heaven, right? Because feelings come and go, right? They're not stable. Jesus said we need to know that we're saved. We need to know his words. Not that we feel his words, but we know his words. These people make their decisions based on emotions, right? They make it based on the emotion of, I want my kid to have fun, or, you know, these people are hurting me, so I want my kid to do this to show those people who think it's wrong that it's absolutely fine and not a problem, right? They're making decisions not based off what is right or wrong, but they're making those decisions based off just what they feel in their heart makes them happy and, you know, vindicates them, right? They're making decisions based off emotions. And Jeremiah says the heart is desperately wicked and no one can know it.
Landon, would you disagree with that?
I agree.
I'm still waiting for the one day that Landon says, no, I disagree with that, actually.
I disagree.
Yeah, again, I'm still trying to wrap my mind around it, and it is something awful that I hate that we as a culture have to deal with, and we as a culture have to accept. That's all I have for this question. If y'all are all ready to move on to the third one.
Yep.
The third question is, how do we make people understand that this is a sin? Right, because Landon said at the start of the podcast, I had someone ask me why I don't go to prom. And yeah, you can say, well, the person who emailed in had this problem as well. You know, she would say that it wasn't a sin, but we kind of struggle with that idea of where do we take them?
Wait, she would say it wasn't a sin?
Oh, I'm sorry. She said it was a sin. She said it was a sin, but she didn't know where to take them in the Bible to show that it was. And we've used verses. We've shown that, yes, the Bible does agree that this is a sin, but how do we get the people of the world to see that this really isn't the best thing for them or really their children.
We talked about this already, but I would point down the road to look at what this type of behavior leads to. I would preface that to say, though, this is going to be something that's very, 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 very difficult to get people to see, especially teenagers, to see that this is a sin, right? Very difficult, especially if they haven't been raised in the environment where it's considered a sin. Go.
Oh, I was just saying, well, especially because so many don't.
Yeah.
Right? Don't we have a podcast on peer pressure or something like that? Comparison. We have a podcast on comparison. And, we talk about what social creatures teenagers are and how everything is in the moment. And when all your friends are going to a moment that you're not going to be in, that's hard. That's hard for them to grasp.
Yeah. So, yeah, you're right. And so they grow up in this environment where it's the cool thing to do. It is the acceptable thing to do. You're not going to really be cool if you don't have a date and go to prom or whatever. Yeah. But when we talked about Herod making this bad decision, convincing them that this thing that makes them so pleasurable and makes them happy is wrong is going to be extremely difficult. So I would tell the person who commented, don't beat yourself up if you can't, because they're kind of what has commonly been referred to, at least between us three, as the cloud. They are in this space of their emotions are completely controlling their actions. And it's a space that is made for marriage. So when people are first married and things are difficult and hard, they still have their emotions and this commitment that keeps them together. But when you use that aspect on teenagers, it means they are not really willing to give up what makes them happy, right? They're not really willing to step out of this environment unless maybe now, especially if you have friends who are in the church and they believe the Bible is God's word, I would take them to these verses. But if you have friends who don't believe the Bible, convincing them that this is a sin is going to be difficult. The one way that I could think of how I would do that is I would talk about the consequences of what this type of behavior will lead to. This type of behavior you'll never have a stable marriage, because you'll always be looking for that next thrill. You'll always be looking for that next person to relive your prom night with, right? You won't raise a good family. We talked today in church about families and how a lot of unstable families, a lot of the kids end up in jail because they don't have a good, solid family, right? So there is so many problems that start with this little seed of, I want to be happy and I don't care how I get it, right? So just make them think about the consequences of their actions a little bit. Maybe it won't affect them right then, but the next time, maybe when they're doing something that they might shouldn't, they'll consider it, and maybe they'll change. Maybe they'll change and they'll turn around. But that's how I would go about it. But again, it's going to be very, very difficult.
Would you try a similar strategy, Landon, or maybe go about it another way? Or
I would start with that, because if you can appeal to like I said I feel like I said this in the last podcast. If you can appeal to their common sense, like with drinking, if you can stop it with the common sense of why you shouldn't do this, just don't. But I have some statistics. I just want you to listen to these things. Starting with this, I looked up the predicted prom songs for 2025. I would not encourage you to look at the lyrics of any of these songs.
Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead. I was just remembering my dad. Yeah. Well, I said go ahead, and then
but go ahead.
My dad told me a story of like he got asked to chaperone for prom, and he didn't do it, but he did look at some of the lyrics of these songs, because I think he preached a sermon, and he was like, it was awful.
Honestly, the first 4 on the list have vulgar language in them, so I can't even read those. But you have 24 Karat Magic by Bruno Mars, which is a very vulgar song.
Yeah.
You have songs like Bad Habits by Ed Sheeran, which talks about doing things with women that you shouldn't do before marriage. And you've got a list of songs talking about things that you shouldn't do, and ironically, it's the very things most kids end up doing after prom night. Now I'm going to start going into some of these statistics. In a study of 12,843 high school students, 14% of the kids reporting having sex on prom night. 5% of those girls and 3% of their boys lost their virginity on prom night, with nearly 53% reporting alcohol consumption. Ooh.
And that's just the reported ones.
That's the reported ones.
Yeah, that's the people who would admit to it.
That's the people who admitted to it. So I'm sure there's a much bigger number who didn't.
And then I looked into the alcohol thing because it got me thinking. And it says 1/3 of alcohol-related teen traffic fatalities occur during prom and graduation season. 1/3. Among teens who drink at prom, a significant percentage, about 54, consume 4 or more alcoholic beverages. And it just goes on to talk about how peer pressure is a leading factor in them doing that. And you talk about the things, and you talk about people in the world. And most people in the world are not going to think anything wrong with your kid having sex before marriage. But there's statistics that show that kids that do that are more likely to get a divorce, like you talked about. But that's not really something that affects their health. And I'm appealing to parents for this, because most teenagers are going to say, well, I'm not going to drink. Like, I know better than to do that, whether they're a Christian or not.
Or I know better than to drink a lot.
Right, I know better to drink a lot. Appealing to parents, listen, they don't. 1/3 of teenagers that die in a car accident happens after they leave prom. And it may not even be because they drunk. You may have a kid that's going to be able to go to prom somehow and listen to the lyrics, look at the immodest dress, deal with the temptation, and do all of these things. But at the end of the day, your kid might end up getting in a car to go home, and they might not come back home because you allowed them to be around people that are willing to put their life at risk. And so even if you're not a Christian, just think about what you're risking. I mean, you're risking everything. And is that something you're willing to risk for a cultural rite of passage? I hope not.
I'll say this to come at it from yet another direction. It will be better when you wait. Save this act. Save it all. Save it all for marriage. I'm not saying you can't go around. You can't date. You can't date a girl, right? We
have a great podcast on dating.
I'm not saying that you can't. I'm not saying that you can't. You can't have a girlfriend. Go on a date. Whatever. I'm not saying you have to old-fashioned, old-style court. You sit back to back. Right. That's not what I'm saying. But if you do that, that is completely up to you and your parents. So let me not judge. Let me not cast judgment on that. What I am saying is it will be infinitely better if you wait. God designed your body to react to this for a reason, right? This is not something of the devil that is not something that the devil made. It is something the devil commandeered. Let me say that. There is a reason that your body reacts, that your mind reacts the way it does when things like this happen. And it's for marriage, right? What Noah said, God gave these people this feeling because he wants them, this cloud feeling, because when they're married and times get hard, he wants that to ease them into this, right? Ease them into this long journey that marriage is supposed to be. Don't waste that feeling now on someone you're not going to be with for the rest of your life. I don't care if you plan on taking that girl to prom and then marrying her the day after. Okay, it is not worth it. It is worth it to wait. And that's all I have. I suppose I don't have a scripture to back it up. All I can do is point you to the Bible and say the Bible always talks about marriage in the best light, and it never says that anything intimate outside of marriage is okay.
Yeah, and again, just to summarize, because I know they wanted some pretty, not specific stuff, but they wanted, reasons. Just remember that this incites lust, which is adultery. These acts that are committed are lewdness, which is a sin. So there are biblical scriptures that show this is sinful to be at or to participate in stuff like this.
I would agree. Landon, would you add anything? Would you add any encouragement for this person and for those listening before we sign off?
Oh yeah, no. I mean, everything we've said has been good. Just remember, dancing isn't the problem; it's lasciviousness that is.
Right.
And like you said, there's so much beauty in what is to come with marriage, and don't waste that because you want it now. There's a reason God set things up the way He did, and it's always because it's better for us. So wait. And you may be made fun of by your friends, and you may be mocked. Jesus was mocked by His brothers for not being like everyone else because He was teaching that He was the Christ. Realize that as a Christian, things are going to be hard, and we're going to have to give up things that our society views as important. And it's going to make us look weird, and it's going to make us look odd. But the truth is, our spiritual life is much more important than physical happiness.
Yeah, I just wanted to add one thing really quickly before we closed. These people, as much as they might profess to care about you and want your happiness, and some of them genuinely have experienced this, and they want you to experience the same thing because it makes them happy. People want to share in that experience of feeling. Trust God. Trust God. Trust God that He knows what He's doing when He designed us. Trust God that He knows what He's doing. That He knows what He's doing when He told us to wait. Trust Him. God ultimately. None of your friends have ever died for you. God did. God promised you the best life. I was reading this morning how if God did not spare His own Son, how will He spare us any other blessings that we ask for? If you wait and pray, then all these things will be added unto you. But seek God first. Seek the kingdom first, and everything will work out.
I agree. Amen. That is going to wrap up the Straight Fire Podcast, this episode of the Straight Fire Podcast, excuse me. We hope that it has enlightened you and informed you on the questions that you've had. Thank you so much to the person, and I don't want to say their name. Thank you so much for emailing in this question. It was a great topic idea and at a really good time. If you have any topic ideas that you want to send us, we're more than happy to look over them. I can't promise that we'll get to them, the week that you send it, but I can promise they will absolutely be considered. They will always be brought before the group, and we will always discuss them. So please, just if you have any ideas, send them to us. We love to hear y'all's feedback, y'all's ideas, y'all's suggestions. Thank you so much for the support that you have given this podcast and on all of our various platforms that I don't have the list with me at the moment, but just y'all's support has been incredible. It makes this even more of a joy to do. We hope that you have enjoyed this episode. We hope that you'll share it with someone who needs it, and we will see you guys next week.